Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Hello everyone. Welcome to this episode, Living and Working in, which today is dedicated to Australia. First of all, thank you very much to our guest speaker, who are based today almost in every continent. So thank you for being there in spite of the late evening in Australia, in spite of your commitments abroad. I remind briefly the rules of this webinar, which is meant to be a very friendly space of exchange and interaction. So please do not be shy. You can switch on your camera. And the basic idea is that our guest speaker will share with us their experiences, their stories, what brought them to Australia, which reasons, what are their views about living and working in Australia. And we will compare Sydney and Melbourne in this session. The second part will be a Q&A session. So please start thinking about the questions you want to ask. You can either use the chat box, either raise your hand when we start the Q&A session. My name is Camilla Pagani. I'm international affairs responsible at Po Alumni. And if you want to follow our webinars on Carrières, I will insert the link in the chat box, so you can watch the previous episodes. The floor is yours. We will start through an alphabetic order. So first, Maxime. Thank you for being there. So what did you bring to Sydney? And please turn your microphone off. Okay.
Thanks, Camilla. Can you hear me?
Very well.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. So Maxime here, Sciences Po alumni, graduated in 2015. I've worked around the world in different firms, strategic consulting firm, private equity, and startups. I was MD of a few startups in Southeast Asia for the last few years. And I've moved to Sydney to join my co-founder, who is Franco-Australian, and Alex, that I met in Sciences Po, actually, in the week to welcome international students. We were both very international oriented, and we met coaching international students coming to Sciences Po through games and sports and competition, and it was very fun. I moved to join him. He's French initially, but now Australian. He worked for many years. He moved to Australia in his case.
We lost you, Max. Maybe you can turn your camera off for the connection.
I can introduce myself.
Okay.
While he's coming back. Cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Sami. I graduated in 2009 from Sciences Po. I'm a Master of Finance and Strategy, and I am a French, Australian, and Moroccan citizen. And I did work first, like in Paris, for about 3 to 4 years in investment banking and consulting, before moving to Australia about 11 years ago now. First in Sydney and then in Melbourne. And I have been working at the NBN. So it's the largest infrastructure project in Australia's history. And it's basically a public company that is deploying very fast broadband across the whole country. So I can tell you a little bit more about it. But for now, I am now currently on holidays, just not far away from France, where I'm on paternity leave, as I have a newborn sleeping not far away from me. So I can tell you a lot more about living and working in Australia, but first I'll leave it to Esther to introduce herself.
Thanks, Sami. Max, did you want to finish before now you're back, or?
So sorry, I think I was actually finalizing. Yeah, my Wi-Fi just shut down for some reason, but I'm back. No, I think definitely giving you. So yeah, that's why I've been in Sydney and happy to answer any question and share more about my journey coming to Australia. But yeah, the floor is yours, Esther.
Thank you. So hi everyone. It's nice to meet you all, I guess. So I'm Esther. I graduated from Sciences Po in 2019. And I'm French Australian. So actually I did part of my primary school and part of my high school in Australia. So I've actually just moved back to Sydney in September. But I guess I did have that familiarity with the country, and my whole family is based actually in Australia. But so to give you a bit of background about myself, so I graduated with the Masters in International Security at PSIA. And then I moved on to do an internship at l'IFRI, which is the French Institute of International Relations. Did a stunt in research there before moving on to UNODC for 4 years, where I worked between Europe and Africa. I loved my work, but yeah, it was just a bit intense, let's say, lots of long hours, lots of responsibility, and my partner and I decided we just wanted a bit of a change of pace, so we quit our jobs and we moved to Australia last September for a bit of a better work-life balance. And yeah, so far it's been a great move. So super excited to be here and chat to all of you. And I know it's I'm saying this to you might be reluctant, but if you do want to put your camera on, it would be great because we're talking to a black screen, but fully appreciate if you don't want to. Thank you.
We are definitely way too scary, apparently.
Like...
No, actually. Okay, that's good to know. Not that scary.
So, Max, why did you choose after Indonesia, when we met, to move to Australia, to Sydney, to build your own business? This is a very interesting choice.
Yeah. It's interesting, but in the same time, I think like many people, I've moved to Australia for business reason. In this case, was to launch a company. I wanted to launch it with my co-founder, who is Australian and is based in Sydney, and hence I joined him. Obviously, I was also open to do it because I thought that Australia would be a great country to grow this business and to live as well. But yeah, so that was really related to the launch of this business, and I chose the person first and the place second. But obviously, I mean, there are a lot of green lights in Australia, and that's why we have many people joining us tonight in terms of English-speaking country, developed, growing, the economy is doing well, some global business centers like Sydney and Melbourne, opportunities to, like good talents, and as well in our side, wealth management as well, a great market to build our moat and start our startup from Australia, and a good, as well, legal system, rule of law, which is important when you build businesses, to make sure that you will be protected, and you would it's not you are not depending on some political changes that as can be the case in maybe some emerging countries. So yeah, on this side is also a pretty green light, and I have spent here less time in Australia than Sami, so I'm sure he will have more to tell about all the amazing nature and places to explore in Australia. But yeah, it's definitely a great background as well. I mean, like what I like, for instance, working in the CBD of Sydney, you have all the business meeting there, you have all the towers, everything, and then you can just run out of your office, and in 2 minutes you're on the seashore, and you can go for a run in the sea, or even dive in the water a few 100 meters away. So I think that's definitely great. When you're in startup, you work a lot, and so having this opportunity to quickly switch between the working mode and the kind of sports or outdoor mode is really pleasant and helpful, versus Jakarta, where you have to probably take a 3-hour flight to get somewhere where you have less people and some rest. So yeah, that's maybe my first answer to that, but Sami and Esther will probably add on this.
Thank you, Matt. And Sami, what is your why did you choose to to settle in Melbourne 10 years ago?
Sorry, I was just coming off mute. Yeah, like the reason probably I decided to move to Australia like 10 years ago is that I first came here on holidays, and it was very interesting for me, like to meet people like my age who were actually just having a much better work-life balance. That definitely was really a point of difference with where I was in France. Like, don't get me wrong. At the same time, like if you move into Australia to work in investment banking and consulting, the hours are quite similar. However, if you move into to work in the industry, the job can still be very interesting, can still bring you a lot of growth opportunities, and definitely Australia is much less hierarchical in my experience than what I have seen in France. And that got me really interested in moving here. Now, as Maxime said, like being in a country that has phenomenal growth, that really definitely like makes it a country full of opportunities. Like a lot of industries are growing. It is a country that is in the vicinity of China and the Pacific region. So definitely all that dynamism that comes from Singapore, Hong Kong, China, Japan, you definitely like notice it. And also you're one flight away from the west coast of the US. So also a lot of tech companies, they do experiment in Australia before they launch globally products. Now, it's also a young country, like full of immigrants. So definitely it doesn't matter where you're from, as long as you're willing to work hard, it's definitely like full of opportunities. Now there is the point that Maxime touched on of a great work-life balance. Like for me, it's you are allowed to have a life outside of work. You definitely like work is almost just something else that you happen to do during the day. You can exercise before coming to work, you can exercise after work, you can meet friends, like definitely like if you love sport and you love nature, it is a great country for that. And also like for me, as Maxime touched on a bit, but I want like to build a bit more on it, is like in terms of social protection and welfare, it is a country, it's not as protective as France, but it's not the US. It's sort of a balanced in a way in that aspect, and that definitely matter when you're sick or something like that. Like it definitely a country like with a good social net. And depending where you are, probably Melbourne is a bit different than Sydney, but Melbourne has a great transport grid. It's not a surprise that Melbourne for many years has been voted like in The Economist, like the best city to live in the world. I've been living there now for 3 years after being in Sydney for 10 years, and I definitely like noticing that every day, how convenient it is like to commute from around the city in a very good public transport grid. Yeah, like for me, it comes down to opportunities. Like when I came to Australia, it was 2013. It was still, Europe was still suffering from the consequence of the GFC, and the headlines in Europe were not very. Anyway, I just noticed like that dynamism it was in Australia was actually something quite a vibrant place, vibrant country to live in. So. And also like something that reassured me is like, it's also like a country like full of expats. So it was it is relatively easy to integrate. Australians are people that are very easy to get on with. I'm sure Esther and Maxime can say the same about it. But also in a way, like I also found a very strong expat community here. And it's a very multicultural country, not only in terms of food, but also at the workplace. You hear all accents. So I was really scared about working in an English-speaking country, thinking, well, how would my accent come across? But I noticed like that in every call, every meeting you can join, there are people from all the different parts of the world. So you're not the foreigner in a way, or the immigrant. You're one of among many.
Thank you, Sami, for this overview, and then maybe we will come back to some points that you raised. But now, maybe Esther, you want to share your view on it?
Sure. I mean, I can really only echo what Sami and Max have already said. You know, the lifestyle's quite good in Australia, especially if you're an outdoorsy person. The nature is very accessible. It's very much valued. It's very appreciated. People go camping on weekends. People go surfing in the mornings. Every person you've met is either training for a marathon or a triathlon or an Ironman or recovering from the last one. So people are very fit and dynamic, let's say. And definitely a multicultural country, and it's something that's valued very much so. So I would definitely encourage people to come to Australia. I just wanted to add, but I think that Sami and Max have really just said most of it. It's the salaries are a bit higher, I would say, in Australia compared to Europe. And what's interesting is that they're not only hire for professional services, so I mean like white collar jobs, but for labor as well. So construction workers or you know, hairdressers, waitressing, all of these things, they're quite well paid, and that's because there's a real need in Australia for those kind of jobs. There's a shortage of labor across most industries, which means that those jobs are very much appreciated, and that is also reflected in the social cohesion and social dynamism that you have in the society. I would say there's perhaps a bit less frustration in certain areas because you know, labor is accessible, it's available, and it's well paid. So yeah, that was the only thing that I wanted to add.
Maybe if salaries are higher, the cost of living is also higher than in Europe, or not? What is your?
I mean, it depends. Obviously, it depends where you are, because you know the cost of living is so different in, you know, Paris and London versus other regional cities. But on the whole, I would say the relationship between cost of living and salaries is probably more beneficial in Australia. The caveat to that is buying a house, which is really hard in Australia. But yeah, I would say on the whole, you're probably better off financially living in Australia. I don't know if Sami and Max, you would agree with that. It's a bit of a generalization, but I think
no, I do agree with that, Esther. Probably the closest proxy, maybe all things being equal, would be Switzerland, maybe, like where the closest example from France, like in the sense that the salaries are high, but the cost of living is higher. Maybe Melbourne is, it may be in a way slightly better than Sydney, just in the sense that you earn the same salary, but accommodation is definitely 35% cheaper. And as Esther said, like you also do pay taxes. It's not France, but you do pay taxes in Australia. It's not Hong Kong or Dubai or the other places. But you notice that because you do get great welfare, you do get you do feel like that the taxes you pay are actually benefiting the whole community, and it's definitely, as Esther said, a country with very low unemployment rate. It's close to 3-4%. It's the lowest it has ever been. It's a country that needs immigrants, skilled immigrants, and also, as Esther said, it's a country with very little inequalities. That definitely makes that a country that is a lot more cohesive socially. I don't know, Maxime, if you want to add something.
Thanks, Sami. No, I think definitely there are some differences, and I didn't know actually that Melbourne was 30% cheaper accommodation-wise. But yeah, there is a high cost of living, but with a more than proportional, you know, higher incomes. I mean, it doesn't apply to me, to be honest, because I'm launching my own company, so we are not in this unfortunately category of employees. But yeah, I do see around and with friends and what I've seen so far that it's definitely more beneficial than in Europe. I mean, I think as we all said earlier, right, the economy being in a better position, the job opportunities, the growth, are better usually than in Europe. Yeah, that's definitely something to take into account. I mean, Australia is definitely a place where people go also for the a lot for the economic opportunities because they know that they will be better off versus their home countries. And so I think that's definitely one of the key pillars.
Thank you, Maxime. And for our audience who maybe are projecting an experience in Australia, what would you suggest? Is it better to come first to Australia with a tourist visa to discover, touch the ground, discover a little bit and look for a job locally? Or would you suggest starting looking for job opportunities online through LinkedIn or other? What is your recommendation on this process? Since Australia is far away, you cannot say, okay, I will spend the weekend there to look for opportunities. So you have to plan carefully about an expatriation in Australia.
I'm happy to go first if that's okay. So I think I want to, because I don't want to paint Australia as like an El Dorado and then you guys come and you're disappointed. But there are a couple of things that you need to be aware of prior to coming. And first I just want to highlight, like, it's so isolated, which I know it sounds like a very obvious thing, but it's really far. And it can be a bit isolating as when you arrive and maybe you don't know anyone. And I do think there's a strong community here, but that is something that to take into account. The second thing is visas are very important. So I'm quite fortunate because I have Australian citizenship, but the Australian Immigration Office is not an easy authority to deal with. You really need to get your visa in check, and they have no problem in deporting anyone that is not abiding by your tourist arrangements. So case in point, if you say that you apply to a tourist visa, you come to Australia and they find out that you're taking business meetings during that visa and you're not on the visa tourist business stream or whatever it's called, that can cause you problems. So I would definitely that is an important caveat, that you need to be really on top of your admin when you come to Australia in terms of the visa. And then in terms of opportunities, so another caveat is internships, which I know is a real thing in Europe, not so much of a thing in Australia, and that's because I think just because the labor market is a bit better, people don't accept to work for free. People take traineeships or graduate programs, which is the equivalent of an internship, but it's less present. So I think if you're going to take an internship, it's going to be with a French company and you'd probably have to be on a working holiday visa. But even then, I think that they would struggle to hire you unless they have a very specific agreement with a school. And then so what to do in terms of scoping. So scoping for a job. So there are two opportunities really, is either to do it offshore or onshore. So if you do it offshore, that means that you need to find a company that is going to sponsor your visa and going to try and get you over. So I think the easiest is actually, or the people that I know that have managed, at least, it's people that have been working for a company in Europe and then they've been transferred to Sydney, and that works quite well. The second option, which is the easiest one, I would say, is to come on a working holiday visa, and on that working holiday visa then identify opportunities, see what you like, see what you don't like. There are caveats to that visa because you can only work for one employer for 6 months. You have a certain amount of hours that you can work. If you want to extend that visa, then you have to work on a farm, which is the the famous backpackers farms, but it's an experience. Like I would encourage you to do it. But that is a possibility, and it is, if you're willing to work and to try and kind of give it a go, like Australia is your country, because there are many opportunities out there, and because there's a shortage of labor, you can have a degree in history of arts and end up working in construction, you know, like as long as you're willing to work and you're dynamic and you have a can-do attitude, I think that doors would open.
I can build a bit on what Esther just said. For me personally, like I came on a working holiday visa. Like that was the quickest way to get. I got it digitally. You get it on an hour, and that's how I started working for the company that who I work with now. I did 6 months. Gives you plenty of time, like to show your value, and also helps me. Like from there, I managed to get like a long-term visa that then became a skilled visa, then became a citizenship. So it is possible, but definitely, as Esther said, it is something that needs to be considered. Like being on the right visa at some point makes a difference. And now, to add to that, something that surprised me when I came here is that no one knows Sciences Po. That was 10 years ago. Things may have changed, but definitely you're not in Europe. My first line, when I was introducing myself, I just said I studied finance at a university in Europe or in France. That for me was very humbling. What really mattered was actually my work experience, what you did at work, and not the project you worked in or the company you worked for. What did you actually do? What difference you made in the project you worked on or the deal you worked on? And also something to be mindful of, just to give you a balanced picture, is that for me, it did not help that I worked in English in Paris, but I never been to an exchange. It's an English-speaking university, an English-speaking country. So there I realized that I was competing with people that were native English speakers. You have a lot of British people, Americans, but also Asian students who studied in Australia, who are competing for the same job as you. What helped me though, to temper all this, to say that there is definitely a pathway through all this, is actually building a network. I did come here, I was here personally. You need to show your can-do attitude, you need to show your commitment to be in the country, and that's true. And you do that through joining to volunteering work, like to looking at joining like an association and tapping into your LinkedIn network. There is a strong French community here that has really good job. At some point in my company, we were 15 people in the strategy team. Half of the team was French. The head of strategy was French. My manager's manager was French. So there is definitely a way through that. So don't hesitate to tap into the French community from Sciences Po and from other schools. You will be amazed by the level of response you get, because all these people relate to you. They all at some point in their past, in the last 5-10 years, took the same risk as you did. So, and to be patient, like building a network takes a couple of months, but it definitely pays off. It's an investment worth it. There are some big Australian companies that hire just through Zoom calls, can hire you remotely, but that's definitely a minority. What definitely opens your possibilities is to be in the country, or as Esther said, having a VIE also helps. It's also something worth exploring. Definitely internship is not really a thing here, I'll be honest with you. And number 3 is actually being transferred by a consultancy or the bank you work for. And something that made a difference for me is actually having work experience. So not to sour the mood a bit, but just like having having worked for a couple of years in Europe does make a difference. Can be long internships, can be very years, but just having a couple of years will definitely help you stand out in the crowd. And as I said again, just being in the country, being flexible, showing that you are actually committed to being in the country. You're not here for a couple of years. You should never say that. You said that I made a decision to move here because of X, Y, and Z. And I have joined this community. I'm doing this. I'm building that network. So being patient for 3 or 4 months before you land your job, and that definitely then pays back. When you look back, we a lot of people around me, a lot of French people, a lot of Europeans have gone through that. And when you look back after 2 or 3 years, it feels like, it feels like it was nothing. It was worth it. Anyway, I'll leave it to Max. I don't know if you want to add something or if there are questions
Thank you, Sabine. I think Max would share a new case, another case when you choose a country to build your own structure. So it's
look, yeah, absolutely. So I think indeed Esther and Sami covered the subject pretty well. But I would say what's interesting is actually I think my approach, even though in my case it's launching a startup, it's also the approach I will recommending for people who want to work and find a job in Australia. Because at the end, what Sami and Esther also said is like, yeah, you need to build your network, be part of a community locally, meet people to really be able to get a job probably. So it's gonna be, except if you have a very, very specific expertise and you are, an absolute rock star, maybe you can do it online, but otherwise it's really, you really augment your chances a lot to come. And with the work holiday visa, you have 1 year to figure it out. So it's pretty powerful. You come and then you meet people, you look, you try to, whether it's the French community from Sciences Po, or whether it's like joining local groups as well, go to networking events, business events. And at the end, what I've done for me to build my network for my startup is also a great way to something to do to build your own career and find a job. Because I think in Australia business really much works in like trust, mutual trust, and actually knowing the person and thinking, okay, this person is trustworthy, this person can bring value to what I do, and it really helps. So yeah, it would be hard to do it through just like LinkedIn outreach from France. But yeah, I think as Sami said, like Australians are very open, and it's like in Sydney, for instance, 40% of the population is born outside of Australia. So it's a very, very diverse country. And actually, even more than what I thought, in the sense that in 1 year, I've been being 1 year in Australia, I've never felt that the fact that I was, French or non-Australian has been a deterrent or has been an issue at all in anything, basically. Then they're contrary to France, maybe, oh, you're not French, or what are you doing here? And it's totally normal in Australia. Like everyone is a migrant or recent or less recent, but like there is really this mindset that it doesn't matter what are you doing, what are you building, how can I help, how can I bring value, how can I get value. But there is really not a subject of where you come from is irrelevant, as long as Esther mentioned, as long as you have the visa, that you are, legally in the country and things like that. Because yeah, indeed, Australia is, I think, much stricter with its immigration and visa regime than in Europe. So yeah, definitely, just make sure you are following the law and the migration rules. But yeah, once you are within this, I think there are definitely a lot of opportunity. And but yeah, it should be really by thinking about what will be your strategy. And basically, and I know many people that have done that, meaning they have a short-term contract of 6 months within the work holiday visa. They work for the company for 6 months, and then within the 6 months, they need to show that they are providing enough value so that the company actually keeps them and sponsor them on another visa. On top of that, there are different types of company with different mindsets. For instance, I know a lot of people, French people notably, that have joined in Australia through work holiday visa, and that have worked for some companies that are more open to hire foreigners. So there is also, it's also a thing, right? So typically ex-Rocket Internet company, like the iconic HelloFresh, and there are a few companies from the German, you know, incubator Rocket Internet, that tend to be much more open and to hire many more people, many foreigners. I mean, it's a win-win in a sense, because foreigners want to come and get a work visa in Australia for maybe, you know, 1, 2, 3 years. And so they work hard because they want to stay and come and get the opportunity to get maybe a longer term visa in Australia. And for the companies, like usually they can propose like a salary that is a little less expensive for them, less competitive, because they know, you know, people coming from abroad would be less picky on that, right? So it's basically, yeah, capitalism, but yeah, that's sometimes, I mean, it's still the Australian capitalism, as Sami said, not the wild west of the US. So it's still a bit more. It's like Australians are very, you know, friendly, maybe less aggressive and less less aggressive than Americans in a sense. So it's a more more friendly environment.
Thank you, Maxime. And if you project to hire for your business in your future, what kind of skills would you look for?
Well, I already hired a Sciences Po alumni, no, but actually, or he hired me, or we both hired each other. But basically, my co-founder, yeah, is also from Sciences Po, so we love Sciences Po people. We even have amazing investors like Sami, also from Sciences Po. So yeah, but no, look, I mean, the skills is really dependent. I mean, obviously, I think when you like, everyone has their own expertise on a given, you know, hard skills and subject. But obviously, as a recruiter, I mean, right now we are not recruiting, but yeah, I've been recruiting in many previous startups in the past. I mean, I think attitude is the most important, because to be honest, a very smart and driven individual that want to learn and grow and make things happen, they will grow and learn very fast. In a few weeks or even a few months, they will already know everything that there is to know in an industry, right? If they put the effort. So I think it's, yeah, it's how do you show if you are relatively young and a limited number of years of experience. I think that's, you know, how you show your dedication and your interest, by doing, you know, like do the extra mile, to really show that, right? If you have some steps and you have an interview and you're like asking the person, oh, by the way, what's your company, in the interview, right? Like, I mean, obviously that doesn't show that you are that driven and motivated, right? If you come and you've already analyzed and read everything that can be read online about the company, and when you arrive in your interview, you're already doing a presentation or your recommendation to the person that is interviewing you, telling him or her, you know, what are your recommendation and what are the you know, insights that you have on their company. That makes a difference, right? So I think this growth mindset of what value can I bring, and this also comes in HR interviews, right? What value can you bring to the person interviewing, as they are not there to, you know, help you, right? You are them to show them that you can help them, and if they're convinced, then you have a job.
Thank you. I hope that the audience have questions, so you can raise your hand. Tanya and Clémentine.
Yes, hello. Thank you for your presentations. I've already spent 1 year in Sydney after graduating, so I've already used my working holiday visa. And I could imagine going back for a couple of years, but the visa process seems quite complicated, or it seems quite complicated to get one. I've been looking at the skilled occupation list, and it seems like most of the jobs listed on there are in business and finance. And now you've also been saying that you're both working either in investment banking or that you've built your own business. And personally, I'm doing a master's in public policy at Sciences Po right now. So maybe a bit closer to the profile of Esther, but then you were saying that you have the dual nationality. So I was wondering, like, if you have any, I don't know if you know any people from Sciences Po who have more of a political science background, perhaps, and who still managed to find a job in Australia without a working holiday visa. Thank you.
Maybe Esther, you want to give some?
Thanks, Tanya, for your question. So So I do want to caveat this by saying that I haven't actually faced any of these visa issues myself, so I don't know if I'm the best place to respond. What that being said is I just wanted, there are two things that are like quite important to note with working in public policy or in security in Australia, which if you've spent time in Australia, you probably already know. But as you probably know, most of the jobs are in Canberra, and Canberra and Sydney, you know, it's quite a different experience. So if some of you have not been to Australia previously or have not visited Canberra, Canberra's in the bush. So it's inland, it's much smaller. It's literally called the bush capital, and it's a very different lifestyle to Sydney, very far from perhaps some of the stereotypes you can have regarding Australia. That being said, as some of you may know, at the moment Australia is investing majorly in its strategic environment, which means that it's a once in a generation shift in the way that it's positioning itself in the Asia Pacific, and part of that is upskilling. So they've realized that in order for them to be able to be the geopolitical medium power that they want to be in the region, they really need to invest across multiple industries, and that goes from you know, research to nuclear technology to quantum science to defense to whatever you may be. So with the caveat that some jobs you won't be able to access because you're not Australian and it's security, there are many more opportunities opening up in this sector. And I think that if you're interested in working in Australia in this field, now's the time to come, because so much is happening. And so actually, for instance, I know that research centres now, a lot of investment is being put in at the federal and at the state level, because they're looking for expertise from abroad, for people that have worked in other strategic environments and other security environments to better understand their theatre. So my response is that I'm not exactly sure how to respond to your questions in terms of visas, but I do know that there are opportunities, and specifically those opportunities are growing in the country in a way that they weren't when I finished my baccalaureate, you know, 10 years ago.
Yes, I will build on what Estelle just said. For you, Tanya, is that focus more on the employer, and then the employer will get you the right visa. And when I say like focus on the employer, is that because as Esther said, a lot of companies are trying to build that arm from and that can be like the public affairs team, that can be their international relations team, like that like mining companies, for example. But mining companies in Australia are global. Like the Rio Tinto, the BHP, they're definitely like building that arm to better understand what's going on in the Pacific region. And New Caledonia is a good example that this is that environment is shifting, but also like think tanks. Like there is a Law Institute. It is a privately funded institute. It's probably quite an important think tank that is or could also be. They know Sciences Po, and they could be interested in your profile. And the big fours, like the Deloitte, maybe less PwC now, but KPMG, Deloitte, and EY, they are much better regarded in Australia than they are in France, and they also offer opportunity that's in that sector, and they open like two profiles that are coming from Europe. So definitely. My response would be focused on the employer, and then the employer hires an immigration agent that gets you the right visa. They have their own ways, they have their own pathways to make that happen. The skilled migrant takes time, and you need to present a lot of credentials, to prove the work experience, to translate your diploma. It's a very long pathway. So my response is should more focus on the employer, and that employer will get you eventually the right visa. That's my personal advice.
Yeah, can you hear me? Wait, Sami?
Thank you very much.
Yes, Max, we hear you if you want to add something.
Yeah, no, I would like to add something because there is a misconception I want to clarify. So, because yes, you have used your work holiday visa, fine. But remember, as you are a European citizen, I guess. Yeah, so for European citizen, including French citizen, with the e-tourist visa, the subclass 651, I will send it to you. You can actually come for periods of 3 months, renewable during 1 year, so 4 times 3 months. And if you take not the tourist, but the business one, which is usually accepted within 1 day, do everything online within 1 day, you just need to share your passport and apply. You are allowed to do inquiries related to employment and all that. So you can do for 1 year, 4 times 3 months, you can come as much as you want to do interviews, go to HR meetings, visit companies, do what you want. And then, of course, once you get an offer, a job offer, then you can, the employer will have to give you a proper visa. So yeah, don't forget that you can come for 1 year. Obviously, yeah, you cannot work during this period, but you can do any type of HR related activities, employment seeking.
And also, Tanya, use that 1 year you have spent in Sydney as actually an advantage to show your commitment to Australia. Like, I would turn it in also a strength. That will put you in a much better foot when you're approaching possible future employers.
Thank you for the advice.
Clémentine?
Yes, hi. Thank you so much, everyone, for all of the tips. It was super interesting. Sort of a related question to what Tanya was asking. I'm finishing my master's in international development at PSIA, so I'm more interested in like philanthropy, development, or NGOs. And I saw that there's a lot of opportunities in terms of like environmental impact in Australia. But I was wondering in terms of more like social impact or development aid, if you have any insights into the field. I'm also interested in like consulting, maybe more towards like environmental or social impact, but also in terms of NGOs and philanthropy, if you have any insights. Thank you.
I mean, I think none of us, are specialists of this field, but indeed there are a lot of opportunities, a lot of philanthropy. I mean, actually less philanthropy than in the US. I was reading an article that's saying that, Australia has a big philanthropy gap in between like the levels of philanthropy and the levels of wealth that are being created. But yeah, so there are definitely a lot of opportunities for consulting or freelance. There are also websites that you can go on. I think I will try to find the link and share it in this chat, where you can actually see what are the opportunities. It's quite common actually to propose like 1 month strategy project, a few weeks, and usually like quite well paid. But obviously you need to have an expertise in a given subject that becomes much easier. But yeah, apart from that, honestly, I don't have any major thing to share, as it's not an area I know very much.
Clémentine, if it does help, so with the caveat of the visa, but there are actually a lot of male consulting companies in Australia. So they're monitoring, evaluation, and learning services that are provided to different agencies, specifically to DFAT, MFAT, which is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Australia, Ministry of Foreign Affairs in New Zealand. Climate is obviously a big priority moving forward. And so actually the Australian government in August 2023 released its international development policy. And as part of that, so I'd have to check the figures because honestly I can't remember on the top of my head, but I think it's every investment, and when the Australian government speaks of investment, it's the development program. So every investment over the cap of, I think it's 3 million Australian dollars, will need to include a climate objective by 2025. And I think that's capped at, I can't remember the figures, but something like 60%. And then by 2027, it's going to be 80%. So there's a huge need to develop climate expertise amongst consulting firms. So ID Park is the company that I work for. So their headquarters are based in the UK, but we have an antenna here in Sydney and an antenna in Adelaide. And we have so much work coming in that we're declining work from clients because we just don't have capacity to respond at the moment, because there's just so much going on. But yeah, I think that yeah, I would say there are a lot of opportunities. It's just a matter of finding them. If you like, I'm happy to send you a list of the consulting companies that work in Australia. I don't know much about the NGO space, unfortunately, but those consulting companies are just the ones that are providing services to DFAT and MFAT to implement development programs in the Indo-Pacific, or humanitarian programs in the Indo-Pacific.
That would be amazing. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? We have still a few minutes. François?
Hi, yeah, thank you very much for being here and answering our questions. I'm in a very similar situation to Tanya, actually, because I've lived in Australia for a bit. I went on a working holiday visa and yeah, didn't make the most out of it. I was freelancing at the time, so I didn't like work for an Australian company, didn't do the networking or anything like that. And now I'd like to go back, and I'm not sure what to do in terms of you know, contacting companies first, because I've had headhunters contacting me from Melbourne, where I was based. But the minute they learn that I don't have a visa, they just, you know, stop all contact. They just disappear. So I'm not too sure what to do in terms of you know, going through an agency first and then finding a company, or just sticking to the company bit and then yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Francois. Like, basically, the way I would approach it is that first, like, look through your LinkedIn network, and you can contact me, Max and Esther, through LinkedIn, like, to see like what industry you're looking at. We could look at employers that I know around me that could have opportunities. But definitely, like, that, what happened to you happened to me as well. Like, when I was living in a working holiday visa, half the recruiters, when they found out you don't have the right visa, and for them working holiday visa was not the best visa to have. It was a good visa, but was not the best, the one that can guarantee that you can stay beyond that 6 months or a year. I faced that myself, but I just didn't let that take me down. Keep up your effort, be patient, and you'll eventually find the right opportunity and the right employer that can give you a sponsorship. But to help you, like, basically think about like that sponsorship has a cost, and not all the companies are qualified to sponsor you. So definitely it will be like the top 20, 30 companies in Australia that can offer that sort of sponsorship that already could help you, like, through your research. The website to look for a job, and I should post it on the chat, is there is LinkedIn. There is also www.seek.com.au. Seek, like SEEK, like the verb seek. But definitely contact people through your LinkedIn. Even if it's like the second, third layer, get a LinkedIn premium account. You can get a free version for a month, and tap on that network, explain your plan, say that you share a common passion for X, Y, and Z with that person you're talking to, and that you'll get people that don't respond, but you do get people that respond to you. And same with headhunters. Some won't be interested because you don't have the right visa. Some will show interest. So it's not an easy path, but it's definitely possible.
And in terms of networking, I would suggest to go to Sciences Po Alumni website and if you are a full member of the association, you have access to the directory. And in the directory, we have approximately 80 alumni in our database in Australia, and maybe you can contact them and ask for advice, ask for suggestions. And the solidarity of our network normally responds quite well in terms of sharing ideas or suggestions. So do not hesitate to think about the alumni network. Maybe a last question. I don't know if there are any other questions. There is a question in the chat box. To stay only 1 month in Sydney and work volunteering in a cinema festival, do you advise to take a work visa or a tourist visa? This is a very technical question, maybe.
I at least on my part, I really don't know. Yeah,
I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty straightforward. If you want to, I mean, you know, like if you want to follow the law, you cannot work if you are paid. If you have a contract and if you are paid in Australia, you cannot come on a tourist visa. The tourist visa doesn't allow you to be paid. Work holidays does. If you know, I mean, what you do with that is up to you. I'm not your dad, but yeah, or the Australian state. But yeah, it's pretty clear from a legal perspective.
It was a voluntary.
If you're not paid, oh sorry. Yeah, if you're not paid, I mean, you're not working if you're a volunteer, right? I mean, yeah, I think that's fine as long as you're not paid, yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Or well, in any case, thank you very much for having participated to this webinar. Thanks to our guest speakers for their precious and useful suggestions. I will put here in the chat box a few links that might be useful. The first one is about all career webinars organized by Sciences Po Alumni that you can rewatch. And the other one is from Sciences Po Carrières, where you have specific also advice on visa procedures, and so they might be useful. And oh, thank you, Max, that you shared your contact. And good luck for your business in Australia, which is very promising. And so thank you very much, Sami, Esther, Max. I hope we can meet once in a beach in Australia.
In Rome.
Or in Rome, yes. Thanks everyone, and have a nice evening in Sydney, or have a nice day in Europe.
No worries. Thanks for meeting you all, and thanks Camilla for organizing.
Thank you.
Thanks Camilla for organizing. Thanks everyone for your attention.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye. See you soon, guys.